I think when the feminist movement surfaced, I immediately saw that there were women in my class that were, brighter than I was, and that were not being encouraged to, sort of to pursue anything besides, being a nurse or a teacher or a homemaker, and all of which are really good professions. But, some of them, one of them was especially good in science, and another one was, they had real potential. They could have been, presidents of the United States without anybody thinking that there was anything wrong with their selection. And then there was my mother she had been given a scholarship to Cornell, but it was a small one, and she couldn't afford it, and so she thought that it would be better for her to attract men by being able to dress well and keep herself physically well. And so she gave up something that she really, that later regretted when I was going for my PhD. She cried and said, how sad she was that she had never pursued her own career. I saw my sister oftentimes having interest in men that didn't sort of, different men than the ones that were interested in her, and didn't have the sort of feel like there was permission for her to say, I'd like to go out with you, could et cetera. And I thought that was, that's ridiculous. I didn't know at that time, that a happy wife is a happy life. And so therefore, it's really important that women have their choice as to who they would like to go out with, because it is true that oftentimes when a woman is happy, a man is usually happy. But when a man is happy, that doesn't necessarily mean that the woman is happy. And so I saw all those things drew me, and I wanted women to be as powerful as they could be, empowered, and to be able to choose to do what they wanted to do when they wanted to do it within the framework of other people, considerations of other people. So the feminist movement represented all of that to me. Yes, it was man bashing right from the beginning. Men earning more money was part of a scheme to prevent women from earning more money, and that men earn more money for the same work that women did, which it turned out. And I wrote a book called Why Men Earn More and What Women Can Do About It, and it outlined 25 differences between what men and women do in their work-life balance. And if anybody should learn from anybody, men should learn from women that even though they earn less money for their work-life choices, they have happier lives as a rule, and that women should be teaching men how to have happier lives, rather than men teaching women how to die in coal mines and volunteer to be in war and be disposable in that way. That have minimal father involvement, that are what I call dad deprived, that those boys and girls are likely to do less well on more than 70 different metrics, from being able to do well on reading and writing and math and science, to being able to graduate from high school to begin with, being much more likely to be failures to launch, being much more likely to drop out of high school, have lower grades, not be in honor societies. And the boys that dropped out of high school, more than 20% of them are unemployed in their 20s, and therefore their eligibility for female love was much less. Girls, they were less likely to be employed. They were far more likely to live in their parents' basements, or to go back home and live with their parents. And women who are looking for future fathers or future husbands that will be fathers very rarely search for unemployment lines in parents' basements for candidates. And if he's tall and good looking, they may be fine about having sex with him, but not for marriage and not for having children. And so these were some of the transitions that I went through as I started to see all the degree to which dad deprived children were also, more likely to be drug addicts, more likely to be addicted to video games, more likely to die from overdoses. And it's being without a dad, or dad deprived, what I call dad deprived, is because nobody's without a dad. So that's why I use the term dad deprived. And is that dad deprived children um, are the single biggest predictor of males committing suicide. Now, almost all the disadvantages, the 70 metrics that I mentioned, are also true for daughters as well. There are some that are true much more for daughters. So, for example, daughters that don't have father involvement often don't know how to please a man except by being sexual, because they don't have the nuances of all the interactions with a man that is not sexual with them, and so therefore they feel oftentimes on dates that either they have that the way to keep a man is to be sexual, even when they're not comfortable being sexual.
Identified a scientific biological correlation to do with telomeres, shortened telomeres, and dad deprivation, right?
Yes, and when I did the research for the boy crisis, one of the things that really astonished, a lot of things astonished me, including the whole formation of a dad brain, which I'll talk about if you'd like. But
Yes.
one of them was the impact on telomeres. So when a boy and girl are 9.5 years of age, a study was done with a control group that had a lot of father involvement and a control group that didn't. And they found that the control group without father involvement at the age of 9.5 had telomeres that were 14% shorter than those that had father involvement. Now, telomeres are, a tiny part of your cell. And the longer the telomeres are when you're about 9.5 years of age, the more likely you are to live longer. They're the single biggest predictor of the length of your life. And so both girls and boys without dad involvement had telomeres that were 14% shorter, but the boys' telomeres were then again 40% shorter than the girls. Process of leaving him there, the boy gets into a fight on the playground and comes home, with evidence of that fight, a black eye or whatever. And if the mom is about to pick that boy up and take that boy back, the dad doesn't have a chance to process with the boy. What were the red flags that you saw that told you that there was a kid drinking, or there was or that basketball practice was really fouling practice, and the big kids were pushing the little kids around? How could you have gotten out of that situation without getting into a fight? What could you have done? That's what dads tend to do, things like let the children be on their own, but then when something happens that's bad, to talk about using that life experience to prevent that life experience from repeating itself. Moms will tend to be more likely to stay on the playground and watch the child. And if something looks like it's brewing, the mom will probably sense it and pull the child out of that situation to begin with. Now, both of those parenting styles have value, but the dad's perspective is that that I want to be able to teach my child how to protect myself before he leaves home, so he doesn't get protected, and then leave home and enter a world where he's not protected. But the mom's perspective on that might be that the mom says to the boy, where was your dad? And the boy said, oh, your dad went home. And oh, why did he go home? Well, there were playoffs tonight. Mom calculates dad more interested in the playoffs than he is in the son. And this is why I can't leave. This is why I can't leave my son or my daughter with the dad. And so that becomes a justifiable experience for her, as to and with a good heart and a protective heart, that she shouldn't encourage more time with the dad. Themselves don't even know. I mean,
Mm.
so I'm not blaming the moms here. Neither mom nor dad understands that the seven major differences in parenting styles that I talk about in the Boy Crisis book, that all of those have positive values for the children. How many dads have I known that haven't read the book, that are able to explain to the moms, I want to roughhouse with the child, because more roughhousing with the children will help them develop empathy. The mom would look at him and say, wait a minute, you're saying roughhousing is going to help my daughter and son have more empathy? That's like the most counterintuitive statement I could ever imagine. Well, and it also helps the children have more postponed gratification. Huh? Seems to me like they're all knocking each other around and somebody's going to get hurt.
Mhm.
And so dads don't know that empathy, postponed gratification are highly connected with roughhousing, and they can't explain it if they don't know it. And so I don't blame moms for not knowing it. And as I said, it's not available for dads. And so this was what inspired me to do the research for the boy crisis. The more that I heard about what the actual connection was between roughhousing, empathy, roughhousing, and postponed gratification.
Yeah, you have noted a difference in how men and women enforce boundaries and create boundaries. I think you've referenced the fact that both men and women create boundaries. It's just that men enforce them. Is that a correct characterization of your?
Yes, women as a rule set more boundaries, and men as a rule enforce boundaries more. So, for example, studies of boys and girls, children under dad's supervision and mom's supervision find that moms will set the bedtime earlier than dad. So let's say mom sets the bedtime at 8:30, dad sets the bedtime at 9. But that under dad's supervision, the children actually get to bed earlier than under mom's supervision. So how does that work? So for example, the children at 8:30 at bedtime that the mom has set might come up to mom and say something like, Mom, I can't go to bed now because I haven't even finished my homework and I don't want to go into school with my homework not finished. And mom goes, oh my God, I don't want you to go into school with homework not finished either. But you were playing some video games before, sweetie, and and you should have been doing homework instead. But nevertheless, you're right. I don't want you to go into school without your homework being done. And so then the child does the homework and maybe takes another half hour to do that. And then at the end of the half hour says, oh boy, I finished the homework now, Mom. Can you read to me? Because, I finished my homework. And mom thinks, well, I do want to reward the child for finishing the homework. And so, and then the mom feels really good after maybe she reads a story or two to the child that she is enforcing boundaries by saying maybe an hour later, no, I've already given you a couple of stories. Now it's bedtime. But what's happened in that last hour is that the child has learned that it can manipulate the mom to extending that bedtime from 8:30 to say ultimately 9:30. Dad is more likely to do that type of behavior the first time, but once he gives a warning about you need to finish your homework instead of talking to somebody on the phone, or instead of playing a video game, or instead of looking at your iPhone, and if you don't do that, then you're going to go into school with your homework not finished, and yes, you'll get a D or an F. And yes, that's your responsibility. If you want to live your life as a loser, that's your choice. But you're not going to manipulate me into making the bedtime past 9 o'clock. And from a mom's perspective, that's sort of like cruel. You're going to have that child go into school without being able to finish with the homework unfinished. That's going to give them a bad attitude towards school and so on. And there's an argument there. But that's a significant difference between a dad style parent, or example of a significant difference between dad style parenting and mom style parenting is, and the importance of boundaries being enforced is that when boundaries are enforced, children learn to not manipulate because they can't manipulate. So children where boundaries are set, and then the child is able to manipulate the mother into, or a father that doesn't enforce boundaries, into a later bedtime, and the set boundaries mean nothing. That tends to enhance disrespect on the part of the child toward the parent.